All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Hue Pham. I am a multimedia journalist, and I'm here today for the South African Film Festival to lead a panel discussion with Ketiwe and Aurelie. All proceeds from this film festival goes to Education Without Borders, a nonprofit that provides educational opportunities for disadvantaged learners in South Africa. So would you two like to give a brief introduction of yourself and your work? So we can start with Ketiwe.
Hello, I'm a filmmaker, broadcaster, and educator in film. I've I've made 4 feature films, 8 television drama series, and I continue to make more content.
Great.
And just finished a documentary, which is at IDFA actually this year.
Perfect. Amazing work. And Aurelie, do you want to introduce yourself and your work?
Yeah, I'm Aurelie Stratton. I've been in the business as an actor for a long time, and the last couple of years I've moved into writing, producing, and getting ready to direct. I directed a short film for the African women during COVID festival, which was a micro short, and now I'm moving up to I think it'll be about a 15-minute short, hoping to eventually get to the feature mark. But yeah, so I'm a new filmmaker, but I've been in the industry for a long time.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for being here today and giving some insights. So today we're going to talk about the film In Darkest Hollywood, Cinema and Apartheid, which is essentially a film about the historical life and influence of film in South Africa, what it meant to the supposed ruling class and the supposed oppressed class, and how it gave an opening for racial divides to be blurred and new opportunities for Black South Africans to achieve higher economic and social status during apartheid. So thanks again, and let's just get into the questions. The first one is, what do you think the role of filmmaking in post-apartheid South Africa is?
It's an interesting question, that, because I think initially, we come from a background of protest art and protest theater, and obviously during apartheid that was quite relevant, and then following apartheid, I think it was about finding out what our stories are and what the stories are that we want to tell, and to put those on a global stage. So for me, it's been an interesting time in film because we've all been discovering who we actually are and what we want to say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the power of being able to tell your own story as South Africans has been really great, because it hasn't always been in our hands to tell our own story. So that has been a really great shift. And also the way in which young people have taken to the medium and are really leading the way in changing the narrative. And I think they're bold and brave and do amazing things. So it's also allowing the audience to see something different, but it's also allowing filmmakers and practitioners to participate in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Aurelie, you mentioned this. My next question. So talking about the narrative and global influence of South African film, and so what do you think the impact of cultural global awareness of South Africa has been, especially when we consider blockbuster movies like movies on Madiba, Nelson Mandela, and really prominent stars like Charlize Theron in Hollywood. So how do you think that has really impacted the visibility of South African film?
I think most recently, it's actually more recent. I mean, Charlize Theron's been in Hollywood for quite a while, and I think a lot of people saw her as American first. But I think that's kind of changed, especially now with the likes of people like Trevor Noah and Thuso Mdedu, who are making great strides and showing the world that we have the talent. We've just never had the opportunity. So it's amazing to see because, traditionally international blockbusters and things like that would come here and they would shoot here and they would film, but they wouldn't necessarily use creatives or actors in big roles. We might be the person standing by the bus. But now, because people are starting to recognize South Africa, to hear our stories, to see our actors, we're starting to get more screen time, more airtime. But I have to say, I believe the reason that's also come about, or what's helped it, is streaming, because we're able to get our stories, across the pond, as it were. So, it's really, really helped engage audiences and help us get our stories out to the world.
Yeah, I think that the stories that have been made, I think the South African story has been a global story for a very long time, and people have watched it from various angles for a very long time. But I think what's really propelling a notion of South African stories being told is South African filmmakers who live in South Africa and work in South Africa, and we are telling the story. So I think that is what's changing the perception of South African stories. It's that we're making more. And I think that in the next few years, we will be changing even the kinds of stories we tell, broadening the narrative, broadening how we're seen and what we say and how we tell our story. So I think that filmmakers have been a great part of changing the landscape.
That's a great point, Ketiwe. I think touching on what you mentioned about the authenticity of filmmakers producing this work, and Aurelie, the mention of streaming, what do you think the role of film festivals are, especially South Africa Film Festival and SAFF, what we are right now, because we stream online, so our reach is global. What do you think that influence and that role is in telling these stories?
Oh, I think
film festivals.
Yeah, go for it, Ketiwe.
I think film festivals are really, really important. I mean, I think that a lot of our films recently, there was 2 films by known associates, which was at the TIFF, that did very, very well. There were films like my film is going to IDFA. So film festivals have invited lots of South African films, and they've done well in those ways. So we value film festivals, and we think that it's a way for us to find audiences, because of course we want to find sales agents, and we want to find other distributors and so on, while we're at these film festivals, while our films are showing. But we also are raising the flag and doing a lot of discussion about who we are as South Africans, and I think over the last 30 years that has definitively changed. And I think as we move on, it's going to change, and we're going to be telling different stories and how we tell them. So film festivals are an important part of the whole ecosystem of film.
Yeah, and I thoroughly agree. And it also gives us as filmmakers the opportunity to not only find audiences, but engage with other filmmakers across the world, which is so important, because, the world is getting smaller, and, economies are getting tighter. So you want to collaborate. Collaboration is everything. And film festivals open a lot of those doors, which is wonderful.
Actually, speaking of these collaborations, a huge part of the film festivals is that, or no, not the film fest, the film in Darkest Hollywood, is that it mentions the financial backing of these films. So not only are stories important to tell, but they need to be funded. And that's a real huge challenge for any filmmaker, anyone who wants a story to be told. So do you want to share about how you feel films are being backed financially then and now?
Oh, film, it's hard. Financing a film is very hard. It's so tough because if you want to release it into cinema nowadays, you're competing against huge blockbusters like a Marvel or a Disney film, things like that. So it's very difficult. And it takes, I would say, at least 3 to 5 years to finance your film. So, if you can find or co-produce it with South Africa, thankfully has amazing treaties with Canada, with the UK. If you can get yourself to markets or film festivals, it certainly does. It helps us. It really does help us, especially because our rand is so low. So, foreign investment, the money, it pushes your budget right up, because of the exchange rate. So it's always the big question: how do we finance? That's always the biggie. I know that, I was on a course with Ketiwe. She was one of the mentors, and that was what they were always going on about, budgets and financing. It's a big thing. There's no one answer to it either, I don't think, Ketiwe.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think what we are fortunate in terms of the African continent as being one of the only countries where government, there are ways in which we can get support from government. Even though that's not enough, but we are fortunate to have that. But it is funding film is incredibly difficult, and having streamers who want more and more content come in as partners, having broadcasters as partners, doing co-productions. We've got 11 treaties around the world. I think it's actually 12 now.
I think it's 12 now, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got 12 treaties around the world, and that makes it easier for us to structure co-productions around the world. But filmmakers are always searching and lurching for funding, and trying to close that funding. So we might be able to open it with some local funding, but how do we make that film? So having co-producers, I think, is going to be more and more essential as we move forward.
Yes, thank you so much for highlighting the challenges and the factors that come into a story, because a lot of people who watch it, they're not seeing behind the scenes, right? So there's the consideration of what it takes and how much goes into a film. I think people could appreciate a film a lot more. And another factor is just like the circumstances of life. For example, COVID really impacted everybody's life and every aspect of it, but especially in film, because people were not allowed to go into theaters. People were not producing. They couldn't come to a set. So can you two talk about your experiences with the film industry during COVID?
I was actually working because what happened was we put some COVID protocols as the industry together to enable some work to start happening soon after COVID started. And so particularly daily content was being filmed. So during COVID, I was executive producing a soap or telenovela, and we were shooting at the time. So it was really difficult because the protocols were really difficult, and because we're human, it was just a very, very difficult time. But that was only for a few people in the industry. It wasn't for the vast majority of people. Did not work throughout COVID. were not able to be employed, were not able to go on set, even though the protocols gave us some opportunity. The risk was too much, and so a lot of people were unemployed, and it's had an economic impact on the industry. And I've started working on I'm a member of this organization called the IBFC, and this organization, what we're doing is we're trying to start a whole campaign around mental health, because I think there was a huge impact in terms of filmmakers and mental health. So we're trying to start a campaign where we give tools for helping people with mental health, because I don't think that we have really gotten over what happened during COVID, and many people are economically still suffering, emotionally still suffering. So I think COVID will actually take a very long time for us to get to the other side of it completely.
Yeah, we also, I mean, it was one of those things where we lost a lot of people in our industry during COVID. It was actually quite crazy how many people we lost, filmmakers, actors. In fact, the show that we just won for best not South African, it was for the National Film and TV Awards. We won best series. Our exec producer and creator, and he was in it as well, Shona Ferguson, passed from COVID. So I think that leaves a mark, and it's very hard to break that, to shift it. It's quite a thing.
Yeah.
I can only empathize with what the challenges were for the industry. There's so many hurdles in the film industry that we don't really see until we are actually in the business.
No, of course. And also, I mean, there were, Ketiwe's right. I mean, there were the odd people shooting, and then, majority were out of work. And then when you went back onto set, you had to put the COVID protocols in, but that also pushes your budget up. So, you know how we were saying finance is hard. So now you've got to find more money because you have all these protocols that you have to put in place.
So considering these challenges, these multiple challenges that you're mentioning, losing people, the cost, the COVID protocols that were happening, there's a lot of, Aurelie, you're mentioning talents being lost, like just by the sense of people losing their lives. But we also mentioned Charlize Theron and Trevor Noah. And although Charlize Theron was seen mostly as American, Trevor Noah really does position himself as South African.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He really hit his stride when he came to Hollywood. So what can you say about the stopping the flow of talent out of South Africa? Like, do talented people need to leave the country in order to make it, or is there an avenue for them to make it within South Africa?
I think that the business is a global business, and I think somebody like Trevor Noah is he's always at home. We didn't actually think he'd left because he was here so much. So I think that the way in which the business works is much more global. So people can work from different places in the planet and still belong to us. So I don't think that we're losing talent. We're just getting more people to see what talent we have, and to see. And they might be living somewhere else, but that doesn't stop them being South African, because, they're American actors who live in the UK, but they're still American. They don't change who they are and how but they just move places in the world. So I think that people are seeing us more because of this ability to transfer. Like Thuso Bedu, she lives in LA, but she's quintessentially
she's here all the time.
And she comes back, and we cheer when we see her. So it's really I think it's about the way in which we frame the global business, and not feel like we're losing people, but what we're doing is people are finding different places to work but still belong to us.
And also, I think there's the positive from COVID, which is very interesting for me. The positive is that for the first time, new filmmakers could attend film festivals and seminars and all sorts of things all across the world online. And they didn't have to buy, try and raise funds to fly to Germany or fly to the States. They could do it all online. And it was such an amazing resource. And it was such a way for new South African filmmakers to get into the stream of things. And similarly, it's the same for performers, because you can now put yourself on a tape and send it to Los Angeles. So you don't necessarily have to be there. So that's the one positive.
Yeah.
No,
I think that's a really great thing. And also there were so many conversations across the globe in with film festivals, like we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think that without COVID, we would have had this kind of conversation where, we're all in different parts of the world, but we're having an intimate conversation about a topic. And so I think those are the things that helped, but those are the things that make it possible for all of us to work in different places. Technology has made it, I'm working with some Canadians, and the time difference is a challenge, but we're online, we're talking, we're sending documents, we're doing everything that I would do if you were in my city, but now it's possible to do it across the world. So I think technology is going to be a huge driver of growth, particularly if you're not in the global north, because, like, for instance, South Africa, we must just say, South Africa's got great locations, we've got great crews, we've got great actors.
Best.
Our industry is world class, really.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like we're trying to trump our own horn, but we
really are, because it's true. It's true.
It's true. So we're really world class, and so but we are a third of what you cost.
Yeah.
If not a quarter. I didn't want to go to a quarter, but we're incredibly cheap in terms of what it costs. And unfortunately, I don't think this is a good thing. We're not unionized. No. So that means that we don't have a lot of the other costs, which, like, for instance, Canada's heavily unionized, and the costs which come with that. And for producers, I'm not saying crew, it's good, but for producers, it's incredibly great value to come and work in South Africa, because you get all of these things. And then we've got great hotels, great food,
great food, great weather.
The only thing we have, which is a bit of a downfall at the moment, is you won't necessarily understand, and I don't think I'm going to translate it either, but we have load shedding. Yeah. I won't translate it.
I'll try to translate that. So load shedding is just
we have a little bit of an electricity crisis,
like portioning out electricity from places.
So we have at different times of the day, you have no electricity for approximately 2 hours. So that's not great. But otherwise, we're fantastic.
I agree.
Well, I'm getting to realize that you're both very, very optimistic and adaptable, because the questions are kind of like asking about the issues, the challenges, but you're always seeing the good side. So you mentioned that, like, okay, so some of our talents leaving the country, but they're also giving cultural currency by being visible. 100%. And so I feel like this industry can be very adaptable. And one of the things highlighted in the film in Darkest Hollywood is that during apartheid, films became an escape for a lot of audience members and allowed them to reimagine what reality could be, what life could be, how there can be hope for them. So now that apartheid is not part of South African political landscape, how do you think the audience receives films now? Because it's not the same relationship. So what do you think the relationship is now?
I mean, there's a
In-
lot of escapism.
Yeah.
People want to escape your daily reality. So there's a lot of that. But I think there's also, let me talk about me as a filmmaker. I want to really start delving into our history. It doesn't necessarily have to be apartheid history, but our history. And there's not been enough content about the past. We haven't really. There was a point, sort of like in the early 2000s, when people said, "Stop about apartheid now; it's over." And I think that was a mistake, because I think that we need that catharsis to understand our past and to move forward. So I'm definitely delving into a past, definitely looking at stories that took place during apartheid, and I'm also wanting to go before apartheid, like telling stories of I don't want to give my IP away, but there's lots of great stories that happened in
Before.
in the 18th century.
Yes.
And there's lots of amazing stuff, and that's what we haven't given our audiences. And I think that's what's missing, is this. When I grew up in England, and one of the things about growing up in England is these historical series.
Yeah.
I mean, bonnet dramas, documentaries, everything. You just watch the past all the time, and you revel in your past, and you get great a sense of self from your past. And I think that's one of the things that I think is missing, is that that even streamers are not really keen on telling stories about our past. But I think it's really, really important for the psyche of South Africans, for the future, for the next generation to understand what happened. Because sometimes, I don't know, some kids don't necessarily know what really happened in the past. And I think if we're to tell it, and it's not just to dwell on the tragedies of apartheid, but it's to tell the resilience, to tell how strong people were, to tell what resources we came from. And so I think those things are important. So as a filmmaker, I'm determined to begin to talk about a past, and it's not necessarily all about apartheid, but there are stories that go right back to 2-3 centuries that are not being told, and we have them.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by those. And they also, whenever you say apartheid, obviously it's got such negative connotations. Of course it does. But there are also some uplifting stories during that time. There's so many, stories about people's triumphs, it's set during that time. So I agree. And, even if you go further back, England make wonderful historical dramas, and people love them. And I think I agree. I think we need to start doing that too.
Yeah.
No, I think
I mean, who knows anything about? Everybody just knows about these bonnet dramas. Everybody's got a little bonnet, and so
that is a great perspective. I've never thought of that. I mean, I grew up in Canada, so there's a huge British influence. But
didn't England owned Canada at one point as well?
Yeah, I think we're still part of the British Crown, part of we're still associated to them some way. But that's a great perspective. I never even thought about that, like how these historical dramas reinvigorate an identity of a pride and understanding of our country and who we are. And I think that's a great point to make. And one of the it just reminded me of how you also mentioned, Ketiwe, that It's great for the next generation because it reminded me of how recently during Mandela Day, the New York Times had published an article on Nelson Mandela and how the next generation do not see him as a hero in necessarily. They're facing a lot of challenges economically and socially. So I think it's a great perspective you have, keeping alive the history so people don't misinterpret or, get a fuller picture of what the past was.
Yeah. I think with Mandela is, you can't take away the impact he had on the globe and the impact he had to carry our story around the world. However, I think that people are beginning to look at the story in a more nuanced way, with sometimes a little bit more of a critical eye, and young people are not as they're not, they want to see more about really what happened. So that's why we got to tell these stories,
right? I think like maybe what you say, Ketiwe, with a nuanced eye, maybe hindsight is 2020, that old saying, right? So
exactly.
In the midst of it, you get caught up in the euphoria, but maybe there's some things that we could still learn from the past. But moving forward with the film industry, we mentioned some of the challenges currently because of COVID and talent flowing out. But what do you think are some of the other challenges that this industry faces at this moment?
Money.
It's always money.
And for those who don't know,
it's always, I mean, for a producer, it's always money to put everything together, and that's the challenge. How do you finance a film? I suppose our financing structures are not as Canada has one of the most complex, interesting financing structures in the world. I don't think there's anyone else actually as we want to be like Canada. We want to follow Canada's lead.
Yes, please.
And be able to have the complexity of financing that comes from both state, private, broadcast, streamers, investors, distributors. I mean, it's very, very complex, the ecosystem in Canada. And so we need to that's what we need. We need more a more complex ecosystem, so that you're not always relying on the same places to get your finance and the same ways. And that means that, bless them, we love them for giving us money, but it's not always enough. And since the streamers came in, they've actually pushed up the cost of content generally. In South Africa. So now we have to find even more money as producers to make our content, because crews want more money, catering, transport, everything is gone up. So we need to make our ecosystem much more complex, so that we can continue to make films, because we love it.
Or did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's always the struggle, is money. And, with that struggle, especially if you're a producer who creates, which, I'm a writer as well, you also worry about getting the funding with a streamer, for example, and then they want your IP. And, you don't want to do that. You want to finance it so that you can retain your creative, you can keep your IP. So I think that's also always a huge challenge, and that's not just here. I think that's a challenge globally.
So I just want to follow up on that. You mentioned money is an issue, but I think money is always an issue in the industry. It comes in waves, right? But I'm guessing now after COVID, it's a much bigger issue. But Ketiwe, you were mentioning diversifying the ecosystem. What do you think is a great way to diversify it? That would be a huge avenue of growth.
Well, I think we need to have more private investors, more people who believe in content as a revenue, being able to make revenue for them. So we need more private investors. We don't really have that many sales agents in our ecosystem. So getting sales agents to come in, getting more distributors, that we do have them, getting more distributors to come in, so that you're not always going to the same people.
Same
You've got
people.
There's more people in the pond. And to have more financing structures, where you can, there's we don't really have private banks. We have a national bank, but we don't have private banks which we could go with. So that's what I think we need to do, is that for there to be much more faith in our
in the industry,
and being able to create the kinds of revenue. I mean, I don't think there's in many countries which create the kinds of revenue that Hollywood does, but it wouldn't be a bad idea just to increase them a little bit more. So that's what I think we need.
Yeah, because with the challenges we've faced as filmmakers, in this country specifically, South African audiences are very used to British and American films. So traditionally they would, before streamers came along, if there was a South African film on and a Tom Cruise film, they would go watch the Tom Cruise film. So then the struggle was to say to South African audiences, no, support local film. And it's gotten better and better. But, in order for us to create something that our audiences want to see, we need the money. It's always the money, because the bigger the budget, the better the production. So,
Yeah. And we're very good at making things like, like those women who quilt, and they make things like a beautiful blanket, and it's quilted and made for. We're really good at that. We can make something from nothing.
Out of nothing. Yeah, it's true.
And we're very good at doing that. But we also now, I think, if we're going to become on the global stage, it's lovely to have that in your grandmother's house. But when we go out to a posh do at the global, on a global stage, we don't want to necessarily have, quilted stuff. We want, so that's what's really that's what we need to change, is that the value of our content that can sit side by side other people who are making content without you thinking, or whatever that means.
So you want to transition from quilting to maybe something more luxurious, like a duvet.
Yes.
Duvet industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A duck down duvet.
A duck down duvet, yes.
Yeah.
We're going for gold.
Yeah. It's great. You have to think about these things in order to manifest them.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies, I really appreciate your time. We're almost running out of time. So any final thoughts that you have, anything you want to share that it's really burning, that you think would be really insightful for the audience to understand about the industry in South Africa?
I'll say this. I think it's a very exciting time in film here. I know as a filmmaker, I'm really excited to see projects that are getting underway and the amazing things that people are creating and doing. And the world is starting to notice us, which means, people are jumping to it, and it's just an exciting time. So keep an eye on us, invest in us if you can, because we're worth it.
Yeah. Co-produce with us,
Yeah.
I think the South African film is not in a terrible place. It's in a good place. It's in a place of growth and expansion, and kind of changing how it reaches its audience. Our audiences were very good for a long time, but now we know there's 7 billion other people out there. So we want to get some of those eyeballs onto our content. And I think we're making better and better and more interesting and more provocative and more engaging and more audience-driven films. And that means that people are going to want to see more and more of it. So I think big ups to the film industry. We don't pat ourselves on the back nearly enough. So we're big up to them.
Big up.
Yay. Round of applause. So thank you so much, ladies. And I also wanted to mention, I'm sure you have a lot of fans now. So how can people watching and are interested in your work follow you? Like, what are some like social media, website, like key work that you like to highlight?
Yeah, I've got a film coming out at the moment, which is called 1001 Days. It's a documentary, and it's been to Sheffield Documentary Festival. It's going to IDFA. I'm applying to lots of places, including some in Canada. And so you know, that's what I'm not really great at social media. I do have a sort of like a Facebook page, and I do have, my son said, you are on Instagram? I do have an Instagram page. I don't even know what I've called these things because I just like do this. So I'm really not organized in social media. So you will find me out there, but it's not organized.
I love that.
And just quickly, can you mention what IDFA is? IDFA for anyone.
It's a kind of like I like to say this. It's the Cannes of documentary. So it's the kind of like prestige of Cannes Film Festival, but it's in documentary, and it's in Amsterdam, and it's coming up in 2 weeks.
Amazing. Yeah, and if anyone wants to follow me, generally Instagram's the way to go. It's just at Aurelie Strat, you'll find me. Yeah, and hopefully when, you know, I get my short underway, and looks like be shooting a feature next year. So because we almost got funding, Ketiwe, we're getting there.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll always put up what I'm doing, and I put up a lot of pictures of my dog as well, so if people want to see a dog, they will see a dog on my Instagram page.
All the dog lovers out there.
All the dog lovers. Well, he's an American bully, so you know, you want to see him, he's on there.
Okay, so some of the films that are coming up, some of the work that's coming up, also support Ketiwe's floundering Facebook page. I'm sure I'll get a lot of traction now. So just keep the hope alive.
I'm keeping the hope alive, but you know, I'm not very just I have sons who try to help me, but they also
And Aurelie can be found on Instagram as well for the younger audience who loves social media. And thank you so much for your time. And I just wanted to mention that In Darkest Hollywood will be featured at the South African Film Festival this year, and all proceeds from the film festival will go to Education Without Borders, which helps disadvantaged learners in South Africa. So not only will you be enjoying the films, you will also be helping out a lot of people have a better future. So thank you so much for your time. You're doing great work. I'm so excited for the two of you, and we can't wait to see what's going on in the future for the both of you. And I will definitely be looking out for your work.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.